Just realized there's still clay on this from when I made the mold. Hey friends, check it out, started a new project. Well, really I started finishing an old project. This is Mehrunes Razor from Skyrim. I made this almost exactly 7 years ago, and it was a commission. Someone hired me because they wanted the dagger. I built the dagger and the scabbard for that first commission. However, the dagger was molded and cast, but the scabbard was not for the original one. And I mailed that off to the guy who ordered it. Actually, I almost didn't even mold the dagger. This is the master, by the way. This is the thing I built from scratch 7 years ago, and then I made a mold of this. I almost didn't make a mold of it, but Brittany convinced me that we should, and I did. And now, years later, I can actually finish one, because like I said, the original got mailed off to someone. The scabbard also got mailed off, and I only made one of them without making a mold. However, sometime after that, I made another one, another scabbard, and I did make a mold of that so I could slush cast it, and that way the dagger will fit in there. This project was, I think, one of the first ones I did that got a lot of attention on the internet. The day after I posted this and the post went crazy on Facebook, I got tons of emails, people wanting one. I did sell a couple. The problem is I did not mold the scabbard, and people were less interested in it without the scabbard. So at some point I had to make the scabbard. I don't remember when I did that. Funny story about that though, this is the scabbard. At some point, a friend of a friend had access to an industrial laser cutter. This was before I owned my own laser cutter. So I actually laser cut these pieces out of 1/2-inch acrylic plastic. This thing is solid acrylic plastic. It's not how I would build it now. It just seemed like a fun thing to do at the time. And I cut out all of the profiles on the laser and then just glued them all together and then sanded it and made a mold of it. The original dagger, this is all very traditional model making techniques. Just layers of plastic glued together and formed to make the blade and this part here. I'm not entirely sure, but this handle might be the first thing I made on a lathe. It might be. I know around that time was when I bought my lathe, and judging by the craftsmanship on this handle, I would guess this is the first thing I made on a lathe. It still works, it looks okay. Not gonna poo-poo it too much. In fact, I'm still pretty happy with the model work on this whole dagger. These little spike things, the pommel. This was an acrylic plastic sphere, and then I sculpted this part all the way around the outside of it. For some hand sculpting 7 years ago, I think I did okay. Still very happy with it. Anyway, years have gone by. I've cast a bunch of them. The mold for the dagger was ready to give up. The silicone was drying out, it was starting to tear, and it wasn't a very good mold in the first place. But before it died, Brittany cast another dagger, and that's this one right here. So I can finally put it together and finish it for myself, and after almost a decade, have my own Mehrunes Razor. The work I've done so far has mostly just been cleanup of the kit. It's a urethane resin kit. The seams are kind of gnarly. Like I said, the mold wasn't fantastic. There were some air bubbles. This was all molded or cast in one piece. This is far too big to fit in a pressure pot. Not that I had a pressure pot back then, but there are a lot of tiny, let's call them micro bubbles just under the surface on a lot of spots. So sanding kind of reveals them, and then you gotta fill it. That's what I'm up to right now, is doing some spot putty work to fill in those tiny little bubbles. If I was going to make a mold of this today, I would do it quite a bit differently. So before, this is, again, not the recommended way. Before, it was one mold and the pouring spout was on the tip here. And the problem is that the pouring spout was very thin. So when I went to pour resin in, it would get clogged. I also didn't have any vents, and I didn't really have a lot of room to cut new ones into the mold, although I tried. I did vent these tips to the blade here and here. That didn't work as well as I had hoped, so there are always bubbles here and here. And then it's difficult for resin, believe it or not, to get down into these spots, so there tend to be bubbles there. There's also these horizontal surfaces on the blade pommel, or guard, there we go, that also get bubbles, so you can see a lot of spot putty on there. So if I was gonna mold this today, I probably would mold the blade portion separately from the handle and the guard. The handle, I would prefer to have a two-part mold that I fill from the top, so I'd have a sprue up here that I could cut off and it'd be nice and clean. And same thing with the blade, I'd rather have the pouring spout be up here and have extra material that I could trim off. So this would be either a 2 or 3 piece molding if I was gonna do this now. I'm not quite sure how I would do the guard here. Maybe do a pour sideways, I'm not quite sure. But suffice it to say, I would take a much more nuanced approach to molding it than just cover the whole thing in silicone and try and pour some resin in the top. I think the first casting I tried to get out of that mold, I thought that the mold was full when I was pouring it in because it overflowed, but it wasn't. The resin kicked enough that the pouring spout at that tip solidified enough that I couldn't pour any more in, and from the outside it appeared to be full, but it was not. It was only about half full. Those are the many reasons why I would do the mold differently. However, I am not going to remold this. I finally have my one soon to be finished dagger to add to my collection, and after that I can put a pin in this whole project and enjoy the completion and never look at it again, or never look back and consider redoing it again. I'm happy with how it's turning out. The paint job, I'm doing a couple things different than the first time I finished a couple of these. One will be adding some texture. The scabbard is meant to have, it looks like it has some fun texture on it, some good contrast. But this is just flat, and I think before I just dry brushed some light like scratches and stuff on it. This time I want to add a texture. I think I'll use a PVA to just stipple on a texture so there's something else going on there. And then when I do my dry brushing for my finishing, it'll be a lot more textured and interesting. Similarly, on this recessed part on the blade, I did add a little bit of texture when I was making this. I believe I spray painted it with a bunch of primer and then just dabbed a sponge on there to get a little bit of texture. But I think I'll put that PVA on there and add a little more texture to this spot too. Just sort of break it up from all of these flat, perfectly flat surfaces on there. Then, all right, a couple other painting things I'm gonna try. First, I'll do a dark layer for all the dark spots of like a metallic, like a gunmetal. But then I'll mask and spray the lighter metal parts, and I think I'm gonna use all clad paints for that. I have a steel, so I'll put a gloss black down and then do a steel lacquer over the top to hopefully get that nice metallic finish. Probably seal it with aqua gloss, all clad stuff. However, the pommel, I want to do something special. This gem, if you play the quest in the game, you got to go get the gem. Somehow it fits in and out of this claw, I'm not sure. Skyrim magic, that's probably how. But this gem comes out in the game, you have to find it and reinsert it. And I think I want it to be a little bit more special than just something shiny. In the game, it looks like marble or something. It's very low res, it's hard to tell. I want it to look a little bit like marble, so I did some paint tests beforehand so that I can be confident that the result I want is what I actually get. So I started by taking some Easter eggs that we got for a video at some point.
Dragon egg.
For the dragon egg, that's right. And I used those as paint tests because that's kind of domed shape. And I tried a couple of different things. So base coat of black, and I also listed all the stuff I did, and I have a couple of examples here so that if I want to recreate them, I know exactly what I did. I started with a black coat, and then I wanted some sort of metallic finish on there, so I airbrushed a little bit of pearlescent paint. I wanted a little purple. I thought purple would look good for this gem, but only a little bit. And then I wanted to make it look like marble. I painted on some veins of marble, it's just more thin metallic paint, but adding those veins, I think, make it look a little bit more interesting. I tried a couple of different gradients. So this one, the gradient is from the bottom going up. This one's from the top going down. And I think I like this one with a dark spot at the top and the color kind of sneaking in around the edges. I also like the finish on this one too. So I haven't quite decided which one I'm gonna go with yet, but these both look really good. To get the gloss finish on here though, because that is like super shiny. I can literally see my face in it. This is epoxy, just a 5-minute epoxy. Yeah, just from the hardware store, 5-minute epoxy. mixed up and brushed on, and then I hit it with a heat gun, and that seemed to help it level out. There are some fisheyes on here. I didn't do a great job of applying it, but it is just the paint test. So I will try and do better on the final one. That said, it is a very small area, so getting coverage on this tiny thing shouldn't be that much of a problem. But going into the paint job, I have a plan, and it's listed right here, and I know that if I do exactly that, I'm gonna get that look, which is fantastic. Taking the guesswork out of painting is a huge weight off your shoulders when you're diving into an ambitious project or trying to get a very specific look. I think that's it. I think I covered absolutely everything about this project, and I'm very excited to finish it up next week. At this point, one more round of sanding, I'll prime it, and then it's on to painting, which should be an awful lot of fun. And I hope you're excited to see it all done. I certainly am. It's been a long road, and I still have a handful of projects over there that have been chilling for similar amounts of time, and I can't wait to finish some of those up as well. That's gonna do it from this project this week anyway. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for hanging out. If you have any questions about this project, please let me know. I'm happy to get back to you. And as always, we really appreciate the support. This thing we do in this workshop of ours is an awful lot of work, and there's an awful lot of uncertainty. But we know for sure that you guys always have our back. And that makes me feel wonderful. So thank you again so much. Thanks for the support. And I'm looking forward to finishing this project with you guys next week. I can't wait to see you then.